top flight player use a chop shot. I've seen him do it in exhibitions. I've seen him do it in fun games. When you get down to the nitty-gritty of focusing your attention on winning a national championship, a shot like that becomes counterproductive. What it does is it upsets your psyche, which must function in one given mode. The given mode is your key shots, and your key shots have to be directed in one way. If you were to divert from that gameplay to try a chop shot, to try an off-speed shot, which is equivalent of a chop shot, you'll find out that you'll lose more. I've seen some of it attempted, but not by the champions. I've seen it attempted by some who wanted to be champions, and just as in tennis many times, it looks great when it's performed. 28,000 people at Wimbledon or Forest Hills go crazy at the World's Fair site, go crazy in seeing it. But ultimately, it plays tricks on you. If you do it against a lesser player and you're successful, hubris sets in your psyche, and at the moment of truth, you may be inclined to try it, and it will be to your disadvantage. So I urge you not to do it.
Another question. I'm going to show the wall here. The front wall is much higher. It's dramatically higher than anything that you see outdoors. And I was wondering, isn't it possible with a lot of topspin to put the ball on the top of the wall, hit it all the way out so that it comes down right before that back wall, and for it to hop up and come straight out and almost go into the bleachers? I'm sure people have
that is quite possible. But it seems to me it's defying the laws of physics.
Oh.
When you said that it's going to hit the ceiling, hit someplace out there near the back wall and then pop up into the bleacher because of spin, that will not happen. What will happen is if you get a really souped up ball and you're someplace in the midcourt and you use this type of spin that I showed you before and you hit it correctly on the ceiling and then the front wall, it will indeed bounce someplace in the middle and then bounce up into the gallery. That's only a replay. It serves no purpose. And I told you that Matthew was a romanticist. He has these notions about spatial dynamics, transcendental inclinations and idiosyncrasies. But the game of handball takes place right down here on solid ground. And to be a champion, you have to concentrate on the bedrock principles of the game. Trick shots, behind the back shots, are all well and good. But that's when you're perhaps making a tape, showing some kids that there's more to handball than just hitting the ball. But if you want to get the maximum enjoyment of this game, just stay with the basic principles as I've outlined them. Get the yin and yang, the ebb and flow of actual competition. Try not to play players who are less skilled than you. Try and play players that are slightly more skilled than you, but have the temperament, not to end the volley, to show how great they are, but to move the ball slightly out of your reach, so that you will then have to move a little bit more, try a little bit harder to hone the skills that are necessary for this game. That's what the game is all about, in my judgment. It's fun, it's friendship, it's relaxation, it's ease. And always keep in mind, the great champions of any sport, no matter what it was, they came in with a certain peace of mind written on their face. They had an ease about them. They had a grace about them. They weren't concentrating, over-concentrating, which causes tension. Play this magnificent game, you have to be at ease. And like the moment of truth in karate, it's only at the moment of truth where all that energy is focused. Before that, you're gliding toward that motion. When you that first thing pulls on that cinder block, that's where the brick is broken and all goes beneath it. That's what this game is about. It's a game of grace, dance, rhythm, flexibility, ambidexterity. Magnificent game. If you bring that attitude toward this game, your climb to the top and championship level will happen much sooner.
Question, how would you evolve a strategy against the great players? You would have a different strategy against Vic Hershkowitz and Marty Decatur, or your brothers. Could you go through a few of the kinds of strategic plans that you would devise against various players, so we could see analytically how you build up a strategy? That would be.
Well, let's take it one at a time. I did have the pleasure of playing Jimmy Jacobs. Played in Denver about 1961. He had a little ankle problem, but despite that, I went on to beat him the first game, went on to winning the second game until I got a leg cramp, and then he went on to win. Welcome to General Hospital. But I had seen Jacobs many years, an outstanding athlete, well-trained. He did bodybuilding, always took care of himself, practiced in front of a mirror to make sure that he had the correct motion of the body. But I discovered that he fell into a pattern. He was a great physical fitness guy, always in tremendous shape, stayed in shape. And with that, he brought it to handball. He became predictable in this sense. He was in such physical condition that he could outlast his opponents. So what he was able to do was, if the ball was hit to his left hand, he could punch it to the ceiling. If a ball was hit low to his right hand, he would powder it front ball, side ball. But he fell into a pattern because he was so good. On his serves, as I mentioned earlier, he'd always serve the ball behind his back, usually with a reverse toward the left wall. And having known all those things, when I came into the game, I brought something that he wasn't used to. I brought one-wall techniques into the game. See, most four-wall players think that the opponent is going to play four-wall. So in certain strategic shots, they will hit a ball front wall, side wall, that goes to the back. Most four-wall players will move to the back and play a back wall shot. But my brother Oscar and I and Carl, we attacked that shot. We took the ball before it even bounced and brought one-wall technique into the four-wall game by killing the ball in the corner or by passing. So when I got out the court with Jimmy Jacobs, he was used to all the other four-wall players and doing what they typically did, like punching the ball high to the front wall, around the side, and buying time to come in. Being one-wall players and very aggressive, we pounded the ball from all spots on the court, and this was disruptive to a four-wall player. It happened even to a great champion like Johnny Sloan. My brother Oscar played him, and they had a kinescope in Washington, Seattle, Washington, where my brother was defending his championship, having beaten Sloan in Houston the year before. It was only a slip in the back door where the camera was. And Sloan was in the front court. The ball went to his left hand, and as a four-wall player, he punched it with his left hand to the front wall, went off the side wall, and he assumed it was going to bounce, and my brother would play it off the back wall. We viewed the film later on, and as the ball came toward the back, what you saw was a flash. The flash was my brother's arm, covering the camera lens, and then as his arm descended, the camera now saw a kill shot rolling out in the right corner, with Sloan looking at it like this, much perplexed. But despite the great champion that he was, Sloan did not change his game plan for 2 games, which was puzzling to me. But it led me to believe that Oscar was so dynamic, so forceful, so aggressive, so determined to use his game plan, which was basically a one-wall game plan, against a strategist like Sloan, who was used to not using a lot of power, but using his brain. He was great at that. He was trained by Gus Lewis and Kenny Schneider and Sam Baker, all those greats at the Town Club in Chicago, where he learned very, very well. He won 3 Grand Slams himself, meaning the singles and doubles, not because he outpowered his opponents, but because he always picked the right shot at the right moment. But then when he was confronted with a guy like Oscar, who who came in with his hand with dexterity, his power with both hands, his ability to kill from any part of the court. He had met his match. You would have thought that in Houston, he would have gotten used to it and done something in the interim for the next confrontation to change his game plan. When we saw the results on the video, he did even worse in Seattle. Oscar was even more aggressive, being the defending champ and used to the accolades of being champ, being very modest. He still kept training and did his thing. So that was Jimmy Jacobs, and that was Johnny Sloan. We played the great Vic Hershkowitz. Now the great Vic Hershkowitz, as great as it was, there was one problem with Vic when we started to play it. It's called old man time. Vic was absolutely great. Had that serve I told you behind his back, two great hands, a left hand that could kill, left wall, front wall, just a great player. But he unfortunately played Jimmy Jacobs in 1955, 56, and 57 in the finals. Was great in the first game, aced him 4 or 5 times, got to an 8-2 lead, got to a 16-8 lead, and ultimately one step short, one step short, one step short, and he succumbed. He had 3 chances at point game to win, and he just couldn't put the system together. Even had he won the first game, in my judgment, he would have been too tired to win the match anyway. And as the second game unfolded, he indeed was too tired. Great champion, 1 wall, 3 wall, 4 wall, one of 3 men, including Oscar Obert, Carl Obert, and Vic, whoever won the national singles in 1 wall, 3 wall, 4 wall. Oscar and Vic did it in the same year, brother Carl did it in different years. Great champion. The skill to play different types of handball, 1 wall, 3 wall, 4 wall, singles and doubles, and master them to the extent that you become a champion. Now, you ask, what about John Bike, today's champion, who just recently displaced Natty Alvarado, who won 8 out of the last 10 or 11 years. Natty Alvarado brought a certain excitement to the game. He was reminiscent of an Oscar Obert, didn't play the walls, just cut everything down on the sides, and with 2 magnificent hands, he could put backspin on either shot with either hand. Tremendous. But you know what we found out? We found out he didn't have a great serve. He didn't have a kill shot. He didn't have a back roll shot. And he didn't have a sailing shot. Now you say, how is that possible in this game of 4 wall with all those surfaces? You know what happened? That cycle I told you about once again went into its ebb and flow. And the cycle was the cycle of power, the cycle of conditioning, the cycle of foot speed, where you just ran everything down, hit it as hard as you can, without any thought about, say, a feather-like punch ceiling shot of a Paul Haber, a punch shot of a Jimmy Jacobs, an off-speed shot of a Johnny Sloan. All those things went into transition. And therefore, today's players are the power players. Natty Alvarado did that on foot speed and those low passing shots, which had nothing to do with 4 wall. Once in a while, he hit a ceiling shot, and he hit it to the center. It's supposed to be to the side. And he only hit it because he was in the back court. And neither opponent hit a ceiling shot, but when now he's just hit it over there as a reflex, all of a sudden his opponent got a bright idea, and he hit a ceiling shot. It had nothing to do with 4 wall per se. But then again, I'm a purist. I love this game. I want to bring out the best in styles and skills. I want it to be a thinking game. If you have to use the walls, use the walls. It's very important to get your opponent off balance. Now, John Bide is a big, enormous lefty. He represents this prestigious New York athletic club. On the court in which I'm standing, 35 years ago, we started playing our first matches. John Bide today in 1991 is playing his matches. What does he bring to the game? He brings 6'2", about 180 pounds, and 2 hands that just fire away at all times. I saw him hit a shot with his opposite hand, which is his right hand, in the far back corner. It hit front wall, side wall, hit the floor, and was rising. Picture this, rising to his opposite hand, and he was in such control of that ball that he whacked it downward for a kill shot in the left, right, the left wall, front wall. I never saw anything like it in my life. And you know another secret? What he does, he brings 5 or 10 pounds of extra weight to the tournaments. We have practitioners in the game who are more skilled, perhaps, but they don't have enough reserve energy for a 7-day tournament. John Bike comes into this game about 5 or 6 or 7 pounds heavier. For the easy rounds, you don't have to be in top condition. By the time the quarters, semis, and finals come, he's in top condition. And his opponents, who were in just as great shape at the beginning, didn't have that extra reserve to keep going on. That's what the game's all about today. So how would I play a guy like John Bike? Simply. Since he's a powerhouse, what you have to do is change the speed of the ball. Since he's a man who hits every shot more or less on the straight shot, what you have to do is use the walls more. I would use what he's doing. Hey, Gio. I would use a Z serve to disrupt his timing. That's what I would do. I would use slow spinning serves even to his left hand, because most players, they overtrain their opposite hands. I would use spinning natural serves down that right wall, but not power. I change the speed of the game. Now you look at me and say, how is this old guy going to be able to do that? Very simple. We had a Christmas tournament down at Flamingo Park last year, and the 2 finalists were Fred Lewis and John Bike. John Bike, 22 years old, Fred Lewis, 45, 46. It was in the heat of the sun. The sun was burning down on the court. The game must have taken place about 1 o'clock. Fred Lewis grew up in those courts. He had the hometown advantage. The game started. You know what he did to John Bike? He made him look very foolish. He gave him all off-speed shots. Bike was trained to hit the ball hard. Lewis gave off-speed shots. You know what happened? Fred Lewis won the first game. But then, old man time. Bike had warmed up in the meanwhile and proceeded to win that match. But in the hearts and minds of the players, they saw something intriguing. They saw a brain function. How to do something to neutralize what your opponent is doing. It's like in the martial arts. They have various types of martial arts where you don't use strength. What you do is use leverage and using the opponent's power just to move on the side. That's beautiful. That's like what handball is. Remember I said you don't move the ball, but you use what's in the ball to move it? Similar to that. When you're in the court thinking strategy, you don't get aggressive necessarily, but you may use a certain move of the body. A move like this, your opponent thinks it's going there, and at the last minute you put it there. Your body comes like this, and at the last minute you put it there. You see? That's what handball is really supposed to be about. Hopefully as the next cycle comes and goes, and I have nothing against great champions. To be a champion, it means you played hard, you trained hard, and through the grace of God and skill or whatever, you took the title. I've seen many great players who never won the title. They should have won the title. But for whatever reason, they didn't win the title. Point being, you have to have something within you to keep going. You have to learn. You have to know what the game is about. That's what happens. Long question, short question, long answer as usual.
There's a certain interesting, very radical counterpoint between the outdoor one-wall game and the indoor four-wall game culturally. The one-wall game really seems to have been a working-class game and a gambling game, and having a lot of the proletarian overlay culturally to it, even socially, have people relate to each other socially. The four-wall game has to be almost physically the product of an oligarchy, of an Augustan structure of people who have enough money to have a building and to have the very particular kinds of structures that produce four-wall. Is there, as a person moves from one wall to four-wall or back and forth, is there a certain kind of cultural vertigo that happens as you move from one world to the other?
Again, you ask a penetrating question, and I'd like to put it into perspective. Remember I mentioned to you 35 years ago we first set foot on the court here and played? Well, we did have a social hierarchy to the extent that the members of the handball team couldn't play on these courts if a paying member wanted to play on it. Okay? The second thing was, it was a time where all the great business moguls gathered here, the men of finance, real estate, and big business. This was the higher echelon those people. People like Robert Dowling, who's a chairman of the City Investing Corporation, giant conglomerate of its time. He founded a college upstate. He was a champion of sorts. He had swum around in Patten Island. People of that higher echelon played their role. As a matter of fact, the club was founded by 3 millionaires. August Belmont, which Belmont track is named. He was one of the prime movers here. Other great financiers, power people, wonderful people, did their thing, made the city work, took chances in entrepreneurial spirit to make it work. That's why we have the luxury today of having leisure time and can pursue these wonderful pastimes such as handball. But putting it back into perspective, the one-ball game truly in that same period of time was a product of the Depression. The WPA built 1,200 courts in the city, put men at work, and more importantly, got the unemployed people to go out and hit the ball against the wall and kept them busy. So while they were playing outdoors and they were trying to survive, gambling did come into play. A lot of fistfights came into play. But in a gentlemanly club of the four-wall type, there might have been a little cursing, or I'll kick you in the Dow Jones or something like that. It was always on a high plane. What's happened, though, is this. You can't concentrate your attention and make a comparison between the outdoor milieu and that of indoors of a prestigious club as the New York AC. You have to put it more into perspective, because in every other state of the Union, including New York City, you have what's called the YMCA. And they have four-wall courts all around the country. And you don't have to be a chairman of a board, you don't have to be a bank president. You can if you want to. But you can join the local Y and the kids in the street, the working man's son. In the 30s and 40s, the war and everything, people were busy. It was the war effort. There wasn't that much time. But they did get money from being productive. And therefore, they had some money to send their children to the YMCA to learn this great game. So, out in the big world, other than New York City, you had more or less a working man's type of handball. In the prestigious clubs like the Olympic Club, the LAAC, Los Angeles Athletic Club, the Lakeshore Club, which I mentioned before, the New Orleans Athletic Club, the Minneapolis Athletic Club, the Detroit Athletic Club, and those, they were the places where I remember we went for lunch on the top floor and we had an unparalleled view of all of Minneapolis. That was gorgeous. Another time I was up at the top of the Tenneco building in Houston, Texas, having lunch, doing business, and I looked down and saw the old YMCA with its green roof, where little ants were jogging around. On that same roof where we used to finish a tournament, go up and sun ourselves, and a pipe would come across the roof, spraying us with a nice cool spray. The sun warmed us and this little spray cooled us. Now, in all the clubs in the whole country, I never saw one similar to that. So you take these beautiful memories with it. But getting back to New York, this may have been a prestigious club and still is. The egalitarian system is working its way into the warp and woof of the societal pattern, thanks to various bills in New York City. But more importantly, even in parallel with that, the West Side Y is at 63rd Street and Central Park West, and the 92nd Street Y. These were places where ordinary people also congregated to play the various sports, despite the fact that Sam Levinson was a member and a great newscaster on CBS, was a master at the riding bicycle and to stay in shape. You know who that is? Well, a wonderful newscaster who at this moment will be nameless, because I just can't remember his name. But we've had some great people over there, and we've had some great comedians over there. Alan from Alan's Alley was there. He had a locker. They have a little plaque on that locker. But more importantly, all the ordinary people of New York City We're attracted to these places. We're attracted to the joys of handball and physical fitness. So getting back to your question, Matthew, I think over time, even though we still have some pockets of oligarchy and aristocracy, and I won't name those places.
I don't have anything against those things.
I think over the long haul, the egalitarian theme will prevail, and the leitmotif of people getting along with each other will prevail. That's my hope, and handball is one of the things that can do it.
Yeah. I was just wondering on a personal level, and I'm all for an intelligent aristocracy. I'm not trying to knock the idea, because it seems to be a natural function of any large social body that certain people become certain things. That's life. What I would like to know is, had you felt at certain times a confusion as you moved between the two worlds, which were so radically quite diverse? As you move from one world, there were a certain set of manners, a certain set of cultural presumptions. To the other world, had there been a certain confusion as you oscillated?
No, I must admit there was never any confusion. My parents, in the old country, my father was a soccer player and he trained horses, show horses. Maybe we got our grade right arms when he applied his arm to our backside when we didn't conform to the rules of the house. But we had a very wonderful childhood, having two brothers and a sister. We always had a feeling of caring about each other, helping each other. And before, when I mentioned that in my first national championship, Oscar let me win that was all a product of growing up together. Two brothers always going out to the courts with the third younger brother, me, always playing handball, learning the rules of the game, learning rules in particular, being lucky enough to have started early in this game, being lucky enough to have had an education in prestigious high school, Powell Memorial Academy, which no longer is, Manhattan College, being brought up in the ethic of what it's like to be part of society, and then coming into the business world precisely because of an athletic skill. Being a trust officer at Manufacturers Hanover at that time, I got that position through the chairman of the National AAU, Charlie O'Connell, who was a member of this club, made us members of this club. Got my first work experience there. They paid for my education, master's degree at New York University and qualifying for a PhD at the New York University School of Business Administration. Going on into the insurance business, getting a CLU, passing 10 exams, going on to the National Association of Security Dealers, passing that exam, always taking what I learned and being married and having a wonderful family, two gorgeous daughters, a wonderful wife, also beautiful and athletic, having won the Budweiser tournament many times. We put all these pieces together, and despite the fact that many times people say they have no time, our transition was easy. Having a family, working during the daytime, going to night school, still found time to travel to tournaments, put on clinics. Charlie O'Connell told me that. He said, you know, I only worry for 1 hour a week. That's on Sunday between 2 and 3. And that's when I take a nap. He also told me, no matter how much you do, there's always time to do one thing more. I learned that. So the transition that you're talking about, Matthew, was rather easy. We got a spirit of sportsmanship. I got that from my brother.